the Dharma. Homage to the Sangha. Where to start? There are so many things. And only a couple of days, and I would like to give you all a good impression of what I'm trying to explain to you. And so the word Zen it's a Japanese form of the word Chan in Chinese. And that is the Chinese form of the word jhana. And basically when we say that word, what we mean is, in our tradition, is to pay attention, to be aware. So whenever I use the word meditation or Zen, that's what I'm trying to say. And the reason why I'm making a point of that is that the word meditation is very much like the word dog. There's one word and we all now have a different picture in our head. And the funny thing is, when you see most dogs, you'll recognize them as a dog, but they're also not the same one to the other. And it's the same with all the different forms of meditation that people have come up with over time. At the moment in our society, it's a fashionable word, and Zen is a fashionable word, and it gets used in all kind of ways. Some of them are more accurate than others, but none of them actually really explain the whole thing. And that is because meditation, the way we practice it, happens not in the realm of words. It happens somewhere else in your being. So whenever we talk about it, by definition, we will not be able to describe it accurately. Any description is going to fall short. So you have to be willing to be with that and move with that and allow your mind to be a little open to something that you do not know in words. You do not know it intellectually. If you think you do, then you're selling it short because you're putting it in a little box. This is it. This is what I know. And once you describe something in terms of what you know, you're no longer completely open to it being different or bigger or smaller because you've put that little boundary around it. Now, because we're human beings, that is quite difficult. We like to know. We want security, and we think security comes from knowing. Knowing who we are, knowing where we're at, knowing what's going to happen. And it's a completely human thing to have. We're all born with it. And it actually, in itself, is a source of suffering. Because we never do know. Nobody has lived the next 5 minutes. Not even the next 5 seconds. And who knows what's going to happen. I might have a little stroke, for instance. No, that just happens just like that. You might have a little stroke. There might be an earthquake. We might find an enlightened thought. Who knows? We just don't know. And the more you try to know ahead of time, the less your capacity to experience what really is going on. And in order to help us find that, there are lots of different practices that people have come up with over time. And the practice that I've learned and do is one of many. And the older I get, the less appealing I find it when people tell me, this is the way, this is the path. And I know even the Buddha said that, but I do respect that. But I always add two little words. This is the path for you. This is the way that worked for you. This is something that works for me. And we can point each other, we can suggest, but everybody in the end has to make their own path with their own capacities. We're all in this room human. We're all more or less English speaking. We're all breathing the same air right now. And we have shared a breakfast, so we have some things in common, but we also have our own very personal differences. And so when I say this is my practice, this is our practice, I don't insist that anybody else will copy it. What you can do is you can take it and then make it yours. So in our tradition, what we do is we help people let go of getting into a rut or knowing what's what by switching what we do very regularly. We have short periods. Half an hour this, half an hour that, half an hour that. We'll be doing a lot more sitting than you're used to doing at home, and we're sitting on the floor that a lot of us are not used to doing at home. So I promise you, we won't sit on the floor for more than 40 minutes at any point in time. This morning session is an hour and a half, so after 35 minutes, we'll all get up, do a little stretching. But we can only do that if everybody sticks with the program and doesn't wander off and don't go for a long visit to the bathroom or think maybe I'll see what it's like outside. Because then that little break becomes a big break and starts to eat into what we can all do together. And so then you're doing everybody else a disservice. So that's part of why we are punctual, is because it helps. Similarly, when we're serving ourselves food, it's very interesting. If you're a monk, you get to serve yourself first. If you're a senior monk in a group of monks, the more senior person gets to serve themselves first. And so they then have the longest time to watch their food grow cold. And when I was younger, I got impatient. Now I like it. I sit here, I'm done, I have nothing else to do. I can just sit here and be. However, 15 people serving themselves food doesn't have to take all that long. So keep that in mind. Just out of kindness to other people, you just keep moving. Secondly, the way we sit makes a difference. And Zazen, or the Shikantaza practice, gets translated in two words: just sitting. And it has the emphasis on both words, on just and on sitting. It goes back a long, long time. It goes back to actually the story of when the Buddha was a little boy and was left behind while everybody was watching the Thanksgiving parade. And he found himself by accident just sitting. And later it is said he realized his oneness with all things. When we do Zazen, we do exactly that. We just sit. So, all the other things that you might be doing, like thinking, planning, daydreaming, complaining, fidgeting, they can be let go of. Sitting, however, is going to get a lot of attention. And so we sit as best we can, so it is important to have good posture. And this is a thing that I find in lots of other places where I go where people meditate, they have terrible posture. And when you have not good posture, you make it hard for yourself. When you just sit, you use gravity to pile all your bodily parts in a little pile that is so much in harmony with gravity that you can relax everything and you won't fall over. Like those piles of rocks that you get in California on the beach. I don't know if they do that here, but do they? In California there's a subculture of people who collect rocks on the beach, and they're all round, and they pile them up on top of each other without using glue, and they don't fall over, and it's quite an art. Now our head is just about the biggest rock in all our bodily parts, and it's on the very top, so you have to balance it up straight. Otherwise there's gravity that will pull you forward or sideways. Finding that place where your spine is upright and your rock head is on top of it takes a little bit of gentle moving. And I still do it after 38 years. Every time when I sit down, a couple times a day, I adjust my posture because it changes, my body changes. According to the weather, according to what I've been doing, according to how tired I am, my body is not the same. Try to make your back a tiny little bit hollow. Stick your tail out just a hair. Not very much, just a little bit. And make sure that if you're sitting on the floor, that both your knees are on the ground as well as your tailbone. And using a little bit of elevation on your tail will help. Because look at this, my knees are on the ground. That's easy. And then the further lower down you go, the harder it gets. And so you have to find that place where you can still do that. If you need a higher cushion, use a higher cushion. If you find it very difficult to do this, you can use a bench. There are a couple here. They're not terribly tall, but they might work for people. And what you do is you kneel with your legs straight behind you, and then you park the bench over your feet, and then you sit on it. And these benches have a slightly curved bottom to them, so you can adjust the angle to match the angle of your particular rear end. That's different for everybody. You do not need to sit on the same thing all the time. So if you get tired of sitting one way, try out a bench, try out a chair. If you get totally desperate, you can also kneel and put your meditation cushion in between your legs. It's not the most elegant posture, but it will work. Once you sit down for a half an hour, try not to move. But if it's going to be the option moving or starting to cry or run away, then move. Okay? But move a little bit. And what helps sometimes is to move a part of your body that isn't so visible. So one of the things is to scrunch up your face really tightly and then letting it go. That helps. Sort of releases a little bit of tension. Nobody needs to notice it. Another thing that helps is you put your hands close to yourself. That also has to do with the gravity. I find if I put my hands out like that or like that, it actually pulls on my shoulder and it widens the area that gravity affects, so that makes it heavier. So you bring your hands close to yourself and you put one hand on top of the other, and which is on top you have to experiment with. It makes quite a difference which one I put. This is a funny thing. Dogen, the translation of Dogen's rules for meditation that we have says put left hand on top of the right hand. And then there was this Theravada nun that came to visit me in the temple, and she said, "Why are you doing that? The Buddha put his right hand on top of the left hand." I didn't know this is what I've learned. But the thing is that one of your hands is slightly more active than the other one. One side of your body is slightly more active, and if you find that, you put that one on the bottom, and the quiet one sits on it, as we say. Now here's a thing where you can move, where your thumbs are. You can twirl them around a little bit and concentrate on that if you're just feeling like your legs are giving up on you. For a little bit. Those all are little skillful means, little helpful hints that will get you across, because really, when you're sitting reasonably upright, you can just forget about it. You're not going to go anywhere, and because you allow your muscles to relax, it won't hurt so much. But there's a learning curve, and I agree with that. So that's what you do. Then, in the Zen tradition, in our Zen tradition, because of the understanding that to pay attention and to be aware is going to be a 24/7 activity and not just 30 minutes here and there, it makes a lot of sense to keep your eyes open. Because if you're going to do walking meditation, working meditation, driving your car meditation, watching television meditation, it's very difficult to do those things with your eyes closed. And people think it's weird. So learn to keep your eyes open and realize that there are potential distractions. The light changes, the sun comes in, you see somebody, the cat walks through your field of vision, and your eyes will move a little bit on the carpet. We don't fix our eyes on one particular point. We allow them to move naturally. And you blink every now and then. But you keep them lowered, because then you have this sort of cone of your field of awareness. And sitting in front of the wall helps with that. It just sort of helps you to be here in this little place. This is where my body is, and I'm going to train my mind to be where I would like it to be. This whole process of doing sitting meditation, we call it training or practice, and what we're training is our mind, and we're using our body to do that, because the mind is a slippery thing. And it's very difficult, but it is very direct to use your body as an anchor and a focus point and say, right, mind, I know you'd like to go to a little trip or whatever, but right now I want you to be in this body, in this moment. Many people's minds are not well trained because it just never occurred to you and nobody taught you when you were little. That you needed to actually train your mind. So the mind runs all over the place. It's like training a dog. You have to keep saying, come, sit, stay. And then 5 minutes later your mind goes off in another direction, and when you realize that, you call it back. Training is like that. Training in any field, whether it is in sports or in science or in playing a musical instrument, training requires repetition. The more you repeat it, the more you develop your skill. And training also requires that you don't judge the training period. So there is no good or bad meditation period. Some of them we like better. Some of them feel easier, but that's completely beside the point. If an athlete would stop training just because it was really hard and he was out of shape and it didn't work, then he would never be an athlete. There are days when it just is hard. There are other days when it is less hard. It does not really matter. As long as you stay just seated, that's good. That's all you need to do. Now, obviously, if you go through a whole month and you hate every meditation period, then it's not for you. And it is not for everybody. But if after a month you think, that was not too bad, I can see some advantages, then you might do it for another period of time. But it isn't for everybody, and that is okay too. So that is that. When you put yourself in the proper posture, you have your eyes open, you're breathing normally, you can help your mind really be here by doing what we call a body scan. And you start with the bottoms of your feet and you feel the inside of your feet. Feel if there's anything going on in there. Have you ever been there, in the inside of your feet? There's blood. There are bones, there are nerves, there's all kind of stuff. Then you go up the back of your legs, your bottom, your back, your shoulder blades, your shoulders, your neck, top of your head. And that is all done in the space of one normal in-breath. So it's not going to take very long. And you just move up very smoothly. And then there's a little pause, and then on the out-breath you go down the front, your face, your throat, your chest, your abdomen, and you rest in your hands. And then you stay there. You don't sit pumping around. Just do it once until the next need arises, which might be in a few minutes when you get distracted. Because you're sitting in a funny place, looking at a wall in a funny posture, if you get distracted, sooner or later, some part of you will become aware. Some part of you will say, hello, you are just distracted. And at that point, you can be happy. Don't be frustrated. Be happy, because now you are aware that you are distracted. So that means your meditation is working. Right before then, you were just distracted. You were not meditating. Now you're meditating and you are distracted, and that is good. And now you can let go of the distraction as best you can. The little verse that we said after breakfast, and we'll say it again after lunch, it's on page 41. We say it after every time we eat. That's why we eat so often in the Zen tradition, because we get to say that little verse. And it is very encouraging to me, because it says, the universe is as the boundless sky. And the Buddha nature of the trainee is pure and beyond the world, just like lotus blossoms are above unclean water. Our Buddha nature, our original nature, is not affected by our distractions and our confusions and our ideas that are all part of the world. It's not affected by that. It can be hidden by that, but it's not ever affected by that. And the universe is as the boundless sky is an analogy of our mind, our greater mind. in which all kind of stuff happens. The universe is actually space. In that space, just like in the sky, there's a whole lot of stuff. There's pollution, there are planets, there are stars, there are asteroids, there are airplanes, there are clouds, there are buildings. The Earth is in space, we are in space, and none of us pushes space away. Isn't that amazing? Space is not affected by the fact that we're in it and we're moving around. Space is still there. You can't grasp space. If you have a little box, there's space inside the box, but that's not all of space. And so it is with our greater mind. That's why we don't try to describe it, because we can't. And that's also why we don't need to worry over much about whatever it is that presents itself during meditation when you are paying attention. You will not, as a result of Zen, get a blank mind. We do not have that. We do not recommend it. We don't think it's helpful. You may every now and then fog out and not know where you were, but that's not the same thing. The point is not to have a blank mind. The point is to be aware of whatever it is that's going on in that mind and choose to not be carried away by it. And in order to make that choice, you have to be informed about what kind of choices are helpful and what kind of choices are not. So paying attention really is key to this. Okay? And remember that when it's very cloudy, the sky is still the sky. When it's very dark, the sky is still the sky. Just because we have our little preferences that we start to worry, but those are just made up preferences. You don't have to necessarily go with it. All right? So much for the sitting meditation. And we keep coming back to that because the paying attention to your inner workings is hard work and is easiest if not much else is going on. But we're not staying with that. The beauty of it, I would have gotten bored with it a long time ago if that was what all it was. The beauty of it, to my mind, is when it gets integrated in being a human being. And being a human being means we do things. We interact. As people, we are one with all of the universe, and we also are individuals. And both those things are true at the same time, and that is very difficult to grasp. You cannot actually get your mind around it because your mind, in that case, is your little intellectual mind, and it is too small. It cannot grasp those two ideas at the same time. So you have to allow the intellect to let go of its grip just enough, and usually what then happens is you become aware of the all is one, and 2 seconds later you bump into somebody and now we're all different. And you go back and forth between the two until eventually you're able to hold both of those at the same time. So when we practice together is when all these little things come into being. Being considerate of others, being kind, being patient, recognizing what your needs are. When we do practice, we say we do practice for self and other. Beginning with ourselves And then from there, branch it out to everybody else. It doesn't work to just help other people at the expense of yourself. It works for a little while and then you keel over or you become resentful. If you can be a healthy, fairly balanced human being, you're of benefit to everybody else. And you can be however you are and as healthy and as balanced as your particular circumstances allow. So there isn't an absolute standard there. And we practice for self and other quite naturally like that. So now, what we'll all do is have an organized little break and talk about standing meditation. So get yourself to standing. Is that going to work for you? Proper standing is on a regular floor if possible. Take a little bit of time. Make sure that everything is still moving. This morning we did our full prostrations, and I like to start that off with doing standing meditation, and it doesn't have to take very long. And in order to do standing meditation, you use gravity, and you also use your conviction. You're going to be standing up straight. That is an expression in our language, to stand up straight and face life. And actually it's a very lovely and sort of refreshing thing to do. So your feet are a little bit apart, about the width of your hips, and your knees are relaxed, and your hips are still tilted just a tiny little bit forward. And so your back is actually the same as when you're sitting in meditation. And then your hands, instead of letting them drain out all your energy down to the ground, you hold them in front of you. This now doesn't work so much, so we kind of go like that. In Zen we say the thumb represents your heart, mind, and you cradle it. You don't crunch it to death, you cradle it and protect it, and you put your other hand around it. And that way you actually help yourself be centered more than when you go like that. Just do it and feel that, what happens with your energy when you let your hands hang down. So sometimes that's useful when you have too much tense energy. You can kind of let it go like that. But if once you're grounded, you can stand like this. Your head's upright, your eyes are open. You can do standing meditation very nicely in the supermarket when you're in line, or here when you're in line for the kitchen. And if you use that time to do the standing meditation, you do lots of little meditations in the course of the day that otherwise you would have to make time for. This is free time. It's given. You can use it. So there you are doing your standing meditation. Walking meditation comes out of that very naturally. There isn't a particular speed, but what is important for walking meditation is that it is one continuous movement. It's not stop and start. But the movement can be very subtle, because right now I'm actually lifting up my own foot, and that means I have to put all my weight on my other foot. My foot is almost in the air, and then I put it down. Heel first, unroll the whole thing, shift my weight, my other foot's coming up. You can try and do this too. Very slowly your other foot is coming up, your weight is shifting. You lift up your foot, you don't wobble, you can actually do it in place. You don't need to go anywhere. You can put it down pretty much where you found it, and then you shift it again, and you raise it up, and you lift it up. If you're standing in line somewhere and it's taking a long time, you can do that. You can keep shifting your weight, lifting your foot, feeling all that's happening inside of your body, which is quite a lot. And it's kind of a miracle that we can do this. And there was one day, years and years ago, when I was just starting to learn this, where all of a sudden I was so amazed by the fact that all my bones stayed on top of each other that I completely fell on the ground. Because it is a remarkable thing that our body can do. And so when you are doing that, you appreciate it. And you have a little sense of gratitude and think, wow, this is amazing. To have a body that functions this well, that makes it possible for me to stand up and to make choices. Because my body is trained to do that, my mind is trained to do that. You can also raise yourself up on your tippy toes and stay there for a little while. The whole thing is about continuation, continuous movement. Gentle, continuous, not with big shocks. Try standing halfway on your tippy toes. Go down halfway and hang there for a while. See how that goes. I think I have the advantage because I used to wear lots of high heels. Practiced in that. So you can play with your body and your meditation awareness. Play around with it. See what it does. Feel for yourself what it does to do a certain thing, a certain way. You might try raising your arms. Don't hit anybody. With the palms down till they're about this high. Stand like a little while. And then see what happens when you turn your palms up. Is that different? It's different. Put them back down around. Bring them all the way down. Here. See that? So, that was our break. Nobody went away, that's good. I spoke too soon, I see. It's okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about enlightenment. My colleague Reverend Sekai, he's very good with words, and he wrote this lovely chapter on, it's entitled The Trouble with Enlightenment. And the trouble with enlightenment is that we have an idea of what it is. And then we try to achieve something. And then we get frustrated. And we are even further away than when we got started. The way I was taught to look at it is that when we are born, where we just are. Little babies, we just are. We don't have opinions just yet. And we are very much connected with all of existence. But really, as soon as you come out of the womb, and maybe even before that, there's awareness, sensual experience of heat and cold, wet and dry, full and empty. And if you are a healthy baby and if you are going to survive, you need those feelings and you need to respond to them for survival. And so a little baby that is healthy will start yelling and kicking its legs, and then miraculously circumstances change. You yell a bit and somebody comes and feeds you, and you yell a bit more and somebody changes your diaper, and that's great. And then when you're about 2 months old or 3, you learn that there's something that works even better than yelling, and that is to pull up your face in a smile. That works better. Now you have 2 things to manipulate your circumstances: smiling and throwing a fit, and you're well on your way to be a human being, a manipulator. And like I said, that is necessary for starters. And then other things start to happen that are painful or happy-making or scary or dangerous. And you respond to those in a certain way because you're small and vulnerable and don't really have many options. And then habits begin to grow. And you develop defense mechanisms, and you develop personality traits, and you become, if all goes well, a healthy human being with a healthy sense of self, which is perfectly good and normal. And we need that to practice. But most of us, somewhere along the line, overshoot the mark, at least a little bit. Some of us by a lot. And so then by the time we're teenagers, we feel so surrounded by defense mechanisms and fearful habits and opinions about things that we then lose our sense of being one. So instead of being one in the universe, you now become a lonely one, and a scared one, and a defensive one. And so then people say, oh, we need to do something, so they take drugs or start to read stuff or learn to meditate or go into therapy or whatever it is that you need to do to address that balance again, because you've gone too far. The nice thing about looking at it that way is that it means that you already know the state of awareness of being connected with all things. It's just you buried it by accident. So all you need to do when you sit Zazen, when you just sit, is whenever you become aware of a layer of opinions or memories or interpretations, to say to yourself, not this. Just not this. You don't know what. We want to immediately grasp it, but we don't. So it's not this and not that and not that. And eventually you'll get glimpses, or more than glimpses, of what is underlying reality. And all these little things are still there. Our personalities will not go away. But we can learn to train them and get a little bit more of a grip on them and choose when to follow an impulse and when not to. And everybody knows that to a point already. If you've ever had a job with a boss, or when you were in school, you know there's certain behavior that's just not going to help. And you can curb it, you know, and then you go home and you do some swearing, but in front of the boss you don't. Well, there's no need to blow steam off in front of somebody you like very much, just because you feel safer. You can learn to actually choose your moments, do it privately, or do it in other ways. And that is very much part of the practice also, is that you find wise and compassionate ways to help yourself deal with all your challenges as they come along, because challenges do come along. And the more you begin to know yourself, the better you can help yourself. And the more you begin to be familiar with your own particular patterns, the more you can see them coming at a distance and go, I don't have to go there. But you will still see it. The mind will not be blank. It will be presented to you as an option. You could get really upset about this. Or you could choose to only get a little upset. Or you could choose to move, or you could choose to stay still. Now, like I said, that takes practice, and it doesn't happen all at once. And when I say all we need to do is let go of our attachments, which is what we call those things, there isn't a time frame for that. It's not we're all letting go of that before 5 o'clock today, or before the end of the weekend, or even in this lifetime. We just don't know. Just all we can do is in this moment let go as best we can. And don't underestimate that. As Western people, we seem to be very, very self-critical. And we are continuously finding fault with ourselves and continuously realizing that really yesterday we messed up and we didn't do so well. Well, it might help your peace of mind if you remember that at any one moment you can only do the best you can at that moment. And if 5 minutes later you realize, well, actually, that wasn't the best thing, that only means you found that out because you did make that mistake, and now you're 5 minutes older and you see it differently. That didn't mean you were really stupid 5 minutes ago. Then you were as wise as you could be. Now you were a little different. I came across a saying not too long ago that says, wise discernment is based on experience. And experience comes from bad discernment. I thought that was really encouraging. Write that up. You need to have your bad experiences. You need to make mistakes. If you don't try anything, you'll never learn. And trying stuff means making a mess, falling over, burning the rice, whatever it is that happens, saying things that, later you wish you hadn't. But if you hadn't, you wouldn't have known. So I thought that was a little gem that I just have been remembering ever since then that I heard it. And of course there are a certain amount of mistakes that we don't really have to try out in great detail. And that's why we have other people bringing us up when we're little kids. They say, just don't do that because it'll hurt and you'll have to try it out anyway and then you'll hurt. And so in Buddhist practice, there's things like that as well, and we call them the precepts. precepts are not the same thing as commandments. Precepts are things that you take on voluntarily by yourself. That's what the word means, comes from the Latin. It's to take upon yourself. And I think the original sort of longer version is to take it upon yourself, to train yourself out of killing. To take it upon yourself, to train yourself out of taking what wasn't given. And the way that is phrased, that includes that there is a time going on. You train yourself to do it a little bit less, and a little bit less, and a little bit less. And there is no absolute, actually. These precepts, they come out of your own heart. They're not invented by some revengeful or mean entity or society or supernatural beings and put upon you. They actually come out of the wisdom that is innate in Buddha nature and that we all have. If we are meditating perfectly, we're perfectly still, and we're feeling at one with all things, there's absolutely no chance you would kill something, because that's you, that ant that's going around there, or it's your brother, or however you want to look at it. And you wouldn't feel the need to take something that wasn't given, because we're all one. So why would you have to take stuff or hoard it or hold it? But because we're not there all the time in that place where you're completely wise and compassionate and loving, but we get distracted and we get hurt and we get confused, then in the heat of the moment it's very helpful to have a little bottom line statement that says, I'm not going to kill. Whatever else happens, I will not kill. And whatever else happens, I will not steal. And as you practice that more, you become more familiar with it, it gets more and more subtle. And then killing is not just taking out your gun and beating somebody with it, but it also becomes metaphorically like killing somebody's enthusiasm, or killing somebody's reputation, or killing your own desire to do something good by saying you don't have the time or nobody will appreciate it anyway. And so then it gets to be interesting, because now you're really beginning to work on freeing yourself from those ideas that your own mind has adopted. And you can let go of those things. And then freedom comes in. So those precepts come hand in hand with the sitting meditation. And if you are not familiar with them, which you probably are, but if you're not, in this very handy little book that I brought, they are somewhere. Ah, here they are. Page 47. Starting actually on page, I might as well start at the beginning. 45, 46, 47, going on to 48. And so in your rest period, if you're going to be reading something, read that. It's very good to every now and then read it for yourself, just to remind yourself. And if you're like me, you can't remember all 10 of them at once. I have a hard time with doing a list of 10 in the heat of the moment. When somebody is being difficult and I'm feeling difficult, I can't really go over all 10. But what I can do is take one. And actually, if you take one, they are all included, because really they're all just more detailed descriptions of what it is to be very wise and compassionate and kind. And so, killing is stealing something's life. Stealing can be being angry because you steal peace. So they can all be explained in various different angles, and it doesn't really matter which one appeals to you, but it helps sometimes to just take one for a whole day and see how all your thoughts look in the light of one of those precepts. And that is a good thing to do while in retreat. Just spend a day. In the morning when you make your initial declaration of intent, you say, I'm going to look at this. And then you follow it all through the day. Now, one final thing, also in this book, in the beginning on page 4 and 5, are a bunch of small verses. And equally, because we only have 4 days together to make most use of your time, you might take a look at those things and say, now this appeals to me. Here, the bath verse at the top of page 5. Whenever you wash your hands or have a shower, you make a declaration of intent.